All right, so first off, whenever I'm drawing, I'm just gonna kind of set my object in front of me. Now, in the case of my particular object, to give it the most interest, I'm gonna make sure that my little pieces are out and about and whatnot. I might tilt it a little bit to get a better angle, which is what I did when I did my original up here. I didn't draw it straight on, I'm drawing it at an angle. I'm gonna break it down into some more simple shapes. I don't need to fill the entirety of my paper, but I wanna fill a decent amount. Now, when you're drawing this, one of the tips that I have is to draw it as though it's not just gonna be a silhouette, though you don't need to make it particularly perfect either. So I know that this breaks the outside edge of my box. I'm gonna put that there. I'm gonna have this, there's a little keychain portion up top. That looks more like this. It goes up like that. I have down here the bottle that sticks out. And I have the little lid that looks like a bunch of parentheses kind of stuck together. Now, I've done this very, very fast and very, very rough. I could get far more detailed with it, but I really don't need to because what I'm looking for is the outside edge. But in order to make that outside edge as accurately as possible, I just kind of drew some of the rest of this stuff. Just like I did on my notes from earlier, when I cut this out, which I'm gonna do in a little bit, as you might have guessed, I'm gonna flip it around so that I don't actually see any of these lines. So, now this is a pretty nice shape, but I've noticed that it's still kind of boxy. Luckily, my particular item has liquid in it, so I'm actually gonna have like a spill of that liquid around. And I'm gonna let that make some gaps. Now I might change this around a little bit still, but you get the idea. I'm drawing this on the back side, quote unquote, of my colored paper so that I can cut it out and make myself both a positive and a negative shape. All right, so here's my positive shape. I'm definitely gonna be using this in my final draft. Here is my negative shape. Be aware that I did try and keep this in as one solid piece as possible because I can use this for a couple different things. One, I can use it to help me decorate my background. Two, it will help me with drawing my thing on top later because there is drawing this multiple times. So I'm trying to keep that until I know I don't need it anymore, at which point I can throw it away. But here is something that you might run into that you might need help with. Right here in my keychain, I have a little hole in my keychain. That's part of my negative space. I don't want it on my positive shape. So there's two ways that you can go about this. You can get something called an X-Acto. An X-Acto looks kind of like a pencil if the pencil had a razor on the end, and you can use that to cut this shape out with a cutting board underneath. Or you can use a pair of scissors. If you're using a pair of scissors, what you want to do is you want to come in on a side where the cut will be least noticeable. I think it'll be least noticeable down here, so that's where I'm going to go. And then come in and cut carefully. I'm going to end up with a skinny piece of paper, and that's going to be easy to rip. So I need to be pretty gentle not to let that rip. I'm going to cut the hole out that way so that my positive shape is in fact making a hole, and my negative shape does in fact have that hole back. So if you run into that issue, that's what you need to do. So now I have, if I flip it over, a clean blank silhouette. If you've never heard of a silhouette, it is just an outline of an object with no details on the inside, filled in. It's not quite an outline. An outline is just a line on the outside. This one's filled in, therefore it's a silhouette. Now, this is gonna be part of my project. That's gonna be one of my layers. So I'm gonna set this aside where it can be nice and neat and not get damaged in my portfolio while I deal with the background. The background. You want some coordinating colors to the emotional meaning of your work. I might use some green and some blue. Blue and green look nice together. Green is my color of disgust and sadness. Blue is my color of calming myself down and going back to normal. I've given them emotional representations. Again, you can look up colors and what they mean. You can also look up color schemes. There's a lot of internet sources that will make color schemes for you. You can look up color scheme generator, and they will show you some pretty cool color schemes. If you are not sure, then you can always ask your teacher. But anyway, so on my background, I can do pretty much whatever I want. In this background, I use some watercolor. You might color it with paint splatter. You might cover it in newspaper clippings. You might cover it in a collage of different stuff. You might take some fabric and glue some fabric down. You might take your background and say, nah, forget this piece of paper. I want some cardboard, and rip off the top layer so you can see all that corrugation in the middle. You can do a lot of things to decorate your background. Pretty much go hog wild. But again, you want the colors in your background, whatever you paint it up to be, whatever you stain it to be, whatever you color it to be emotionally represented in your artwork. And anything else that you do to it, you want to make sense. So here's some things that I did to mine. On mine, I added text. You're going to need to add text into your artwork somewhere, and I've added mine in 2 places. I've written it out on the background, and I've written the same thing as an outline around some of my artwork that I didn't think stood out very well. And I just did it on my silhouette portion where it wasn't being overlapped by my contour drawing. But I have the same words back here in a white gel pen. I don't need them to stand out super much in my background, so I used a white gel pen. You could use a white colored pencil. You could even make the entire background one big word if you wanted. Just something back there. Or you can choose to have text somewhere else. But if you're not sure where to put text in your artwork, background's a great place. The other thing that I did in my background, I used watercolor in my background, and here's the thing about hand sanitizer. It is almost completely isopropyl alcohol. And here's the thing about watercolor. I can make fun little dots and spots in alcohol, or using alcohol on watercolor. So I thought that was a nice little homage to what I was actually drawing. I made alcohol spots on there. Now, you could just have them for fun. Sure, it's a really cool look. But in this particular case, it's an added level of meaning. The more meaning, the mo better. All right. So again, watercolor, colored pencil, painting, collaging, sticking down stickers. If you have like those like things where it's like you have a bunch of anime stickers and you want to stick them all down to make a background like you're covering a phone case, you can absolutely do that. Doesn't matter to me. Again, you just want to make sure that the colors in that are matching the emotional purpose of your artwork. I want to feel clean, so I'm using greens, and I want to feel nice again, so I'm using blues. All right. You have some time to decorate your background. I will probably not be doing that in this video, just to make sure that we can get through the rest. But what you're going to do after you have this lovely colored background, pretend mine is, you want to place your positive shape on it. Note here, I have it overlapping my edge a little bit. You can do that. It's okay. It looks kind of cool as long as it's not sticking out so far that it's going to get damaged. Or you could have it fully sit on, or even twist it so that it's landscape orientation rather than portrait orientation. That is up to you. Most of the time, having a little bit of overlap with the sides tends to look really cool. So here, if I do it like this, I'm overlapping a little on this side and a little on that side. I can also move it down, move it up. I don't generally want something dead center. This is kind of near the middle though, so I might pull that back up again so it's closer to the top corner. So it's kind of more top corner than it is dead center. All right, so once I figure out where this is gonna be placed, I'm going to glue it down. And so again, you're gonna have to imagine that the background is colored. It's got some details, some stuff to it, and I glue down this. Next step, draw a contour drawing. This is a silhouette. It has no details. On top of it, I'm going to draw my object again. Now, there's a faster way to do this and a slower way to do this. You are welcome to either. Way is just to redraw it. If you are not sure if you want to draw directly on top of here, I don't suggest you do it if you're a little nervous. You can always draw it on a piece of newsprint paper and transfer using one of our light boxes or using a graphite transfer method. Maybe you trust yourself and you want to draw us directly on there, but if you do, here's my suggestion. Remember that negative shape that we had before? Stick it right on top and trace over it. And so I can come in here and I can place it pretty much directly on top. I flipped it the other direction to give it a little bit more movement. It won't look quite so copy-pasty if you do something like that. And I can literally use this like a stencil and trace my shape around. Let's see if I can do this without smudging it too much. But you can see me trace my object around. Doop, 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 doop. Since this particular shape will have, by necessity, a little bit more detail because it is a contour drawing, not just a silhouette, it's going to appear like it is on top of the rest. So keep that in mind as you're drawing. Again, you could have this one overlap the edges if you wanted, which is just fine. You might even have your negative shape in your background as part of your background collage, and then you draw it inside that negative shape hole in your background. That'd be interesting looking. Just a possibility. There's lots of possibilities on how to layer this together. I am not going to be using my negative space in my final product, but you definitely can. It can look really cool. Doop, 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 doop. I'm trying my best not to let this move around because it's not actually glued down or anything. There. I've used it to trace out my shape. And then I can take this, moved around a little bit. I don't want to forget my little hole in my keychain. And from here, I can start adding back in some of the details that I lost, such as connecting this back together, drawing the rectangular portion of this, adding the rest of the little knob here on, inside of my lid. And my little winner. And a couple little buttons and a couple little things like that. You're going to continue drawing this on. I suggest tracing this out in pen or some kind of high contrast image. You don't necessarily have to, but I highly, highly suggest it because it will tend to disappear on you. You don't necessarily need a black pen. In fact, if I'd done this on my own, I might have used a dark blue pen, but I didn't have one. Now, what that means is you'll have a decorated background, a colorful piece of paper that is a silhouette of your object that is a positive shape, or maybe a negative shape. You will have a drawing of your object on the top as well. And from there, it is just a matter of adding in contrast. What do I mean by adding in contrast? Over here, I shaded a little bit with a purple pencil on the outside of my sanitizer bottle so that I would see the difference between the bottle and the outside of the bottle. It starts to disappear if I don't do that. Same thing on the outside edge of my colored silhouette. That's where I wrote some more words to help them stand out from their background a little bit more, though I did emphasize that this was on top by not going around the edges behind my drawing here. I also added a tiny little "You win," which is the same thing written on the actual guy in the same white gel pen that I used to write the words in the background. All you want to do is add in just enough color. Sorry, disruption. You are adding in just enough shading or outlining to help all of this stand out. Again, mine was as simple as adding a little bit of color around the outside edge. You could also come in and shade this or color this much more if you'd wanted. You can come around and outline things. You can make, like whenever people do that thing where they have like a shape. And they repeat the shape outside, outside, outside. However much you want. But you want these shapes to stand out enough that they don't blend in their background too hard. And that is the basic steps on how to get this done. So go ahead, get working on that and get busy.